All right, so we're here today to talk about Illustrator, Adobe Illustrator. We're using edition CS6, the 64-bit version, but that doesn't really matter. But we're going to look today at the core basics of Illustrator, how to open and create files, how to create artboards, how to manipulate those artboards a little bit, and then how to save, and very specifically how to save not just to the computer, but to your student drive so that you will keep it no matter what happens to our PCs here at school. So we're going to start off by just opening Illustrator, and to do that, we start off on our Windows home screen, and we're going to come down here to the lower left to that Start menu, and we'll click there. And we'll look through our Start menu. Yours is obviously going to look a lot different than mine, but what you're looking for is this one, Adobe Illustrator CS6 64-bit. The other thing you're going to see is this one that says Adobe Bridge. You do not want that. That's not what we're working. Make sure you click on the one that says Adobe Illustrator CS6. And when you click on that, it's going to bring up a window. And I'm going to maximize mine so it takes up the whole screen. But this is Illustrator. Yours may look a little different than mine because I've changed a few of the settings in mine compared to the defaults. But you'll see basically the same concept. Up here at the top, we have our menu bar, which you should be familiar with. On the left-hand side, we have all of our tools that we'll be working with. On the right-hand side is all of our properties for those tools once we've got them selected. And then in the middle, we have our work area. Now, one of the things you'll notice right off the bat is that it's blank. It's just a big black square. There's nothing here to work on. And in fact, if I were to click on a tool, nothing happens. So if you double click a few times, it tries to open one. But what we care about today is actually going ahead to open a file and create a new design. So we're going to come up here to where it says File, and we're going to click on File, and you get all these different options, but the one we care about today is New. Right here at the top, you'll see it has a shortcut, which is what this is, of Control-N, meaning that if you press the Control button and the N key on your keyboard at the same time, it will bring up this same dialog. But we're going to stick with using our mouse today. So I'm going to click on New, and you'll notice it brings up this new document window, and it gives me the chance to create a file that I want to work on. So the first thing it has is a name. So what do you want to call this? So I'm just going to call mine Practice File. And then it says, hey, Profile. What profile do you want to use? And it should generally start at Custom, and that's perfectly fine. Number of artboards. So let's talk about what an artboard is. An artboard is kind of like a canvas. It's what you get to work on in Illustrator. Now, you can have as many artboards as you want in the document space, but for our purposes, we're just going to stick with a single artboard for this moment. The size, if you click on size, it does give you some presets. So, standard A4 size paper. Here's letter paper, so your 8.5 by 11 paper. But then you can also do custom, and you can select down here, which is what we're going to do. So first off, pretty straightforward, width and height. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to type 10, press the tab button, and it takes me down to height. I'm going to press 10 again, and it defaults to inches. Over here, I can select a different unit if I want. I'm going to leave it at inches. Yours may have started out with pixels, so you might have to change that. But we're going to go with inches. And we want to go ahead and change the numbers and make sure that they say 10 and then IN for inches. Just so you note, if I change this to, for example, centimeters, it does automatically change it to the correct number. Go back to inches, back to 10 inches. Okay. Our orientation, is it a landscape or a portrait size piece of paper? Which again, you should remember means, is it portrait, up and down, landscape, wider than it is tall? For ours, because it's a square, doesn't really matter. Bleed, you're going to get to ignore, doesn't matter. And for our work today, we're going to stick with this RGB color mode. We'll get into a little bit more about what colors do and how they function in Illustrator a little bit later on. But for right now, we're just going to leave everything else by the defaults. Okay? And I'm going to click OK. And suddenly we have a whole set of new options. The first change, obviously, we have our big white 10-inch by 10-inch artboard here in the center. You'll notice right up here, we now have the name of our file and a percentage. That's our zoom percentage. Basically, how much are we zoomed in on this document? Okay. and it says, hey, this is an RGB file, and we're in preview mode. Now over here on the right, you should have noticed that we had this colors suddenly jump in, and a bunch of our properties panels now have options in them. Now, once again, your properties panels may look a little different than mine, and that's okay. But we're going to sort of dive into several of these as we go. So this is our file, and I'm just going to go ahead. I'm just going to draw a line on it just so it's got something on it. Okay. But what we want to talk about next is we want to talk about saving. So one of the big things about these computers here at school is that they do get automatically wiped of all the random saved data in your student use drives fairly often. Every 2 to 3 weeks, they automatically get wiped. That's not something we can stop. So if you save your work just to the computer, you may end up losing your work. So we want to make sure that we have practice saving our work to the H drive or your student drive on the network. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to come up here to File, just like we would on any other document, and we're going to scroll down to Save As. Okay? We're going to use Save As so we can make sure that we put it exactly where we want to keep it. I'm going to click Save As. It brings up a new document where we get to select where we're going to save this work. In this case, it's defaulting to my Documents folder. This is the folder that wipes itself out on your student accounts every few weeks. So we don't want to use this particular folder. So what we're going to do is we're going to come down here to this PC. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for my username. So my username is john.bucant. All of you should have a username that should be your first initial dot last name and then possibly has a number. But it should be your username, home directory, H:. What this is your district H drive. This drive stays with you from the moment you join Fayetteville Schools up until you graduate high school. Anything you put in this will stay there throughout your career. So if I double click here, you'll notice I've got a bunch of different folders. To keep all of the stuff in this class separate, what you probably want to do is come up here and create new folder. It's this little folder with a starburst, and give it a name. So you might say this is graphic design class. There we go. I'm going to double click in there. And then down here at the bottom, it says, hey, what do you want to call it? In this case, it's practice file. I'm going to save it right now as an Illustrator file, so Adobe Illustrator. But you'll notice there are PDFs, as well as a few other formats, which we'll talk about later in the year. And then we can hit save. Something you're probably going to want to do is get in the habit of this file name being related to the assignment you're working on. That'll make it a lot easier for you to find stuff later on. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. Save again. It's going to ask me, hey, how do I want to save it? You can leave everything here at its defaults and just click OK. And that's it. It is there saved on my H drive. So I'm going to close it out. Later on, when you come back, you'll have to be able to access those files. And to do that, you just have to open that particular spot. So we're going to come up here to File, and we're going to go to Open. And in this case, I can click on this PC again, find my H drive, find my folder, and find my file. I double click there, and there's my file. So this is a habit you should get into, saving files to your H drive, not to the computer, and then making sure that they're named so you can find them the next time. So always come up with some sort of an organizational scheme that works for you so you can keep track of your work. That's the basics of opening Illustrator, creating an artboard, saving and opening files. Next up, we're going to start looking at the line tools and how the line tools let us do the very bare basics of working in graphic design.